On a freezing winter night, 11-year-old Carla hears faint cries outside her home. What she finds on her porch changes her life forever. Two helpless puppies, trapped in a deadly storm. One brave decision. And a promise that brings police to her door at sunrise. This heartwarming story proves that even the smallest act of kindness can ripple out to change countless lives. The wind that night didn't just howl. It screamed. In a peaceful town outside Bozeman, Montana, most families were already asleep, hoping the storm would pass by morning. But 11-year-old Carla was still awake. She sat curled up on the living room rug, wrapped in a hoodie 2 sizes too big, sketching in a notebook by the dim glow of a table lamp. Carla always struggled to sleep when storms came. The noise made her feel like the world outside was breaking apart piece by piece. That's when she heard it. At first, she thought it was just the wind changing direction. A strange sound slipped through the cracks of the storm, thin, weak, almost impossible to catch. Then it came again. A whimper. Carla froze, her pencil hovering in midair. She held her breath and listened. Another sound followed. Softer this time. Fragile. Almost like a cry that didn't have the strength to become one. Her heart began to pound. She stood slowly and tiptoed toward the front door, careful not to wake her parents. The floor creaked beneath her socks. The wind battered the house again, rattling the windows so hard it felt like the glass might shatter. Carla reached the door and rested her hand against it. Another whimper. This one was closer. With trembling fingers, she turned the knob and pulled the door open just enough to peek outside. Cold air rushed in instantly, biting at her face. And there, on the porch steps, sat 2 small shapes pressed tightly together. 2 German Shepherd puppies. They couldn't have been more than 10 weeks old. Their fur was damp and clumped with ice. Their tiny bodies shook uncontrollably as they tried to curl into themselves for warmth. One puppy had its head tucked under the other's chin, both of them barely moving, as if they'd already used up every bit of strength they had. Carla's chest tightened. "Oh no, no, no," she whispered. She flung the door open wider and dropped to her knees, ignoring the snow soaking through her socks. The puppies lifted their heads weakly. One let out a faint cry. The other tried to stand and immediately collapsed. That was all it took. Carla scooped both puppies into her arms, holding them against her chest as tightly as she could without hurting them. They felt like ice. She ran inside, kicked the door shut behind her, and leaned against it, breathing hard. Her hands were shaking. "Mom! Dad!" she called, her voice cracking. But the wind swallowed her words. She didn't wait. Carla rushed into the living room, grabbed every blanket she could reach, and spread them out on the floor. She wrapped the puppies carefully, tucking the fabric around their small bodies the way her mom used to do when her cousin was a baby. The puppies whimpered, but they didn't fight her. They were too cold. Carla sat cross-legged on the floor and gently rubbed their paws, trying to warm them. Their pads were stiff. Their ears drooped. She felt panic rise in her throat. "Please be okay," she whispered. "Please." She remembered something her mom had done once, blowing warm air onto cold hands. So Carla leaned down and gently breathed onto the puppies' faces, slow and careful. "It's okay," she murmured. "You're safe now. I promise." The puppies shifted slightly, pressing closer to her warmth. Carla didn't know how long she sat there. Minutes blurred together as the storm continued to rage outside. The lights flickered again, and for a terrifying second, the house went dark, then the power came back. She stayed right where she was. At some point, her mother, Serene, appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a robe, her eyes heavy with sleep. "Carla," she murmured. "What's going on?" Carla looked up, tears shining in her eyes. "Mom. I found them outside. They were freezing." Serene's expression changed instantly. She knelt beside her daughter, touching the puppies gently. "Oh my goodness," she breathed. "You did the right thing." Carla felt a small wave of relief wash over her. Her father, Nathaniel, joined them a moment later, concern etched across his face. Together, they moved the puppies closer to the heater and brought warm towels, checking their breathing and color. "They must have been out there for hours," Nathaniel said quietly. That night, Carla refused to go to bed. She built a small blanket fort beside the couch and stayed awake with the puppies, feeding them warm milk a spoonful at a time, drying their fur with a hair dryer on the lowest setting, and whispering stories just to hear her own voice. Around 4 a.m., something changed. One puppy, later named Atlas, lifted his head and nudged Carla's cheek with his cold nose. The other, Nova, climbed clumsily into her lap and let out a tired sigh. They weren't shaking anymore. They trusted her. Carla smiled through exhaustion, resting her forehead against theirs. By sunrise, the storm had passed. The world outside looked calm, almost peaceful, as if nothing terrible had happened at all. That's when the flashing lights appeared. Red and blue reflections danced across the living room walls. Carla sat up instantly. "What?" she whispered. She peeked through the curtain, and her stomach dropped. 3 police cars surrounded the house. A loud voice echoed through a speaker. "Everyone inside the residence, remain where you are. Do not open the door." Carla's heart began to race. She grabbed Atlas and Nova and tucked them behind her blanket fort, crouching over them like she was guarding something priceless. Her parents rushed in, wide awake now, confusion written across their faces. "Why are the police here?" Serene asked, her voice tight. Before anyone could answer, a heavy knock shook the door. "Ma'am, sir, this is urgent. Please open the door." Nathaniel hesitated for a moment, then unlocked it. Cold air rushed in as officers stepped inside, snow still clinging to their boots and jackets. One officer scanned the room. Another held a photo. Carla's hands trembled. What if they took the puppies away? What if she'd done something wrong? Then one of the officers stepped forward. He looked down at her, his expression softening. His name badge read Officer Granton. "Carla," he said gently. "You're not in trouble." He turned the photo around. It showed 2 German Shepherd puppies. Atlas and Nova. Officer Granton exhaled slowly. These puppies went missing last night after a transport van crashed on North Ridge Road. The driver swerved to avoid a deer. He was trapped for hours. Carla swallowed hard. When emergency crews reached him, the officer continued, the puppies were gone. "We've been searching all night." Carla hugged the blankets tighter. "I just wanted them warm," she whispered. Officer Granton nodded. "And because of that, they're alive." Then his tone shifted, heavier, more serious. "There's something else you should know." Carla looked up. "These puppies weren't ordinary rescues," he said. "They're being trained for a special therapy program. They're meant to help children who've been through trauma. Kids who can't sleep at night. Kids who are scared." Carla stared at Atlas and Nova, at their tiny paws and tired eyes. She had no idea. Serene rested a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You saved someone's future," she whispered. Officer Granton cleared his throat. "We need to take them to a veterinarian to check for frostbite. But after that," he smiled. "They'll want to see you again." "Really?" Carla asked softly. He nodded. "Kindness like yours doesn't get forgotten." As the officers carefully carried Atlas and Nova toward the door, one of the puppies let out a small cry. Carla ran forward. "I'll see you again, right?" Officer Granton looked back and smiled. "That's a promise." The house felt strangely quiet after the police cars disappeared down the road. The storm had left behind a world wrapped in white, but inside, everything felt empty. The blankets on the floor were still warm. The little fort Carla had built stood half-collapsed, like it was waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. Carla sat on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the front door. She kept expecting to hear soft paws. A tiny whimper. Anything. But there was nothing. Serene sat beside her and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Nathaniel stood by the window, watching the last of the flashing lights fade into the distance. "You did a good thing," Serene said gently. Carla nodded, but her throat felt tight. "I know," she whispered. I miss them already." That morning, Carla didn't touch her breakfast. She barely noticed the smell of toast or the steam rising from her mug of hot chocolate. Her mind was somewhere else, back on the porch steps, back in the blanket fort, back in those tired eyes that had trusted her without hesitation. After breakfast, she carefully folded the blanket Atlas and Nova had slept on and placed it at the foot of her bed. She smoothed it with both hands, like it was something fragile. Every night after that, she did the same thing. She folded the blanket. She whispered a quiet prayer. And she hoped. Days passed. Then weeks. Winter settled into the town fully, covering rooftops and trees in thick layers of snow. School resumed, and Carla tried to focus, but her thoughts drifted constantly. During math class, she doodled small paw prints in the margins of her notebook. During reading time, she found herself staring out the window, imagining two growing puppies somewhere far away. Every afternoon, she raced home from school and checked the mailbox. Every afternoon, it was empty. She never complained. Never asked her parents to call anyone. She held on to Officer Granton's promise like it was something sacred. That's a promise. One evening, as Carla sat at the kitchen table doing homework, headlights swept across the wall. She looked up. A van was pulling into the driveway. Her heart skipped. The door opened, and a familiar figure stepped out into the cold. Officer Granton. Carla shot out of her chair so fast it nearly tipped over. "Mom," she shouted. "Dad." The front door opened before anyone could stop her. Officer Granton barely had time to smile before two energetic shapes burst out from behind him. Atlas. Nova. The puppies, no longer tiny, no longer fragile, came charging toward her. They were bigger now. Stronger. Their coats were thick and glossy. But the moment they saw her, something clicked. They ran straight into her. Carla dropped to her knees just in time as they tackled her with wagging tails and joyful yelps. Their paws pressed against her shoulders, their tongues covered her cheeks, and their excitement was impossible to miss. She laughed and cried at the same time, wrapping her arms around them. "You came back," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You really came back." Officer Granton watched with a soft smile as Serene and Nathaniel stepped outside, stunned. "They remembered her," Serene said quietly. "They never forgot," the officer replied. Inside, the puppies explored the house like they'd never left. Atlas sniffed every corner with purpose, while Nova bounced from room to room, tail wagging wildly. After they settled, Officer Granton cleared his throat. "There's something we need to talk about," he said. Carla looked up, suddenly nervous. "The therapy program," he continued. They were impressed. Not just by how the puppies survived, but by how they survived. Carla tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "They trusted you," he said. "That kind of trust doesn't happen by accident." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. "They want you to help with their training." Carla blinked. "Me?" Officer Granton nodded. "Supervised, of course. With professionals. But they respond best when you're around." "But I'm just a kid," Carla said softly. Nathaniel smiled. "A kid who didn't wait for permission to do the right thing." Serene squeezed her hand. "A kid who listened when someone needed help." Carla looked down at Atlas and Nova, who sat at her feet like they belonged there. Her heart swelled. Over the next few months, Carla became part of something much bigger than she'd ever imagined. Every Saturday morning, Officer Granton picked her up and drove her to the training center just outside town. The building wasn't fancy. It smelled like coffee and clean floors, and the walls were lined with photos of dogs and the people they'd helped. Children with nightmares. Veterans with heavy memories. Families learning how to smile again. Carla trained with Atlas and Nova under careful guidance. She learned how to speak calmly, how to read their body language, how to reward patience instead of excitement. But more than that, she learned something else. Healing wasn't loud. It was quiet moments. Soft trust. Being there when someone felt afraid. Atlas grew into a steady presence, calm and grounding. Nova became gentle and alert, always ready to comfort. One afternoon, Carla watched as Nova curled beside a little boy who refused to speak. Slowly, cautiously, he reached out and rested his hand on Nova's fur. That was the first time he smiled in weeks. Carla felt tears prick her eyes. Later that evening, she asked Officer Granton, "Do you think I helped them become like this?" He shook his head. You didn't make them who they are, he said. You showed them who they could be. As spring approached, the snow melted and the town came back to life. Carla still trained with Atlas and Nova, but now they were preparing for their next step, working full-time as therapy dogs. The night before they were scheduled to leave for their permanent assignments, Carla sat on her bed with the blanket they'd once shared. Atlas rested his head on her knee. Nova curled against her side. I'm proud of you, Carla whispered. You're going to help so many people. The puppies stayed close, as if they understood. The next morning, Carla walked with them to the van. This time, she didn't cry. She hugged them both, pressing her face into their fur. Be brave, she said softly. You're meant for something big. Atlas licked her hand. Nova wagged her tail. As the van drove away, Carla stood tall. She felt different now. Stronger. Years later, Carla would look back on that winter night as the moment everything changed. She grew up with a quiet confidence. She volunteered. She listened. She paid attention to the world around her in a way most people never learn to do. And whenever someone asked her what made her believe in kindness, she always told the same story. About a storm. About 2 freezing puppies. And about choosing to open the door. Because sometimes heroes aren't loud. Sometimes they're small. Sometimes they're just brave enough to care. And sometimes they wear red coats, stand in the snow, and change the world without even knowing it. If this story touched your heart, let us know by liking, sharing, and subscribing for more stories that remind us how powerful kindness can be.